and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and it is so good to have you here. Social media is playing a bigger role in our lives, both for business and pleasure. It's also a tool that's being used aggressively in political campaigns. Candidates and those in elected positions are able to take their message directly to Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, and in some places are cutting traditional journalists out of the dialogue. Some would argue, well, there just aren't many reporters to cover the issues, so why not go directly to social media? Others say it's a bit of a slippery slope. So we're going to talk about this with Frank Sapola. He is a former New York City radio and TV news reporter and anchor. He's standing by. First up, though, we're going to be speaking to the editor of the New Jersey Globe. So let's get to it. Joining me now is David Wildstein. He is the editor of the New Jersey Globe. David, so good to see you. Thank you for being on the show.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Oh, very well,
Good.
thank you. So I don't know if I want to know the answer to this question necessarily because I am media, but what do you make of how media has covered this past election campaign cycle?
You know, I'm disappointed. It is harder and harder for voters to get information, and with the decline in local newspapers in New Jersey, which, you know, New Jersey's newspapers used to be fantastic. They used to cover things in great detail. You would know who was representing you. You'd know where they stood on issues. And now, because they're not covering it, and I'm not talking about just the national level, I'm saying, you know, even down to the town council, local government. I mean, you know, when I was mayor, you know, 38 years ago, I had the Star Ledger and the Daily Record and a weekly newspaper. In every meeting, they were covering every word I said. People knew where I stood on issues, and now they're not there. So how are voters supposed to vote when they have finding out about what somebody believes other than what that person is saying to them through the paid media from their campaign funds? It's a little frightening. It really is.
Well, following up on that, social media, and everybody has a cell phone that records, and they can put their own information out there the way they want without having to talk to a reporter. So can you talk about the role social media is playing in political coverage?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, we've seen it, you know, in New Jersey recently. I mean, Governor Murphy has done a great job of going, you know, it's almost direct to the consumer, cutting out the middleman, which is the media, and that's not so bad. It's not so bad when elected officials do it. What I really worry about is the fact checking and the accuracy, and the fact that there's so much false information out there. You know, we hear about fake news, but fake news isn't, to me, certainly in New Jersey, it's not really the media. It's just people who are out there, and they're putting terrible information out there, and people believe what they see. And that's frightening. It really is. It's not good for democracy.
Well, and there's an issue of trust. And before we started recording, there are even polls that say, well, I'll let you say it,
Yeah, I mean,
about the public's perception of media.
yeah, Fairleigh Dickinson University recently did a poll, and they asked people about whether they thought that local media, local newspapers were doing a good job. Were they, you know, doing their job for, you know, to seek transparency in government, to make sure that everything's on the up and up. And the numbers were really disappointing. Just 12% of New Jerseyans said that these local newspapers are doing a good job, and 41% rated them as doing a poor job. And that's not going to work. And, you know, and I you know, it's that old adage, if you have to tell somebody that their hair is on fire, it's too late. And you know, one of the things that disappoints me is we've seen a decline in local newspapers, and I get that, you know, look, things have changed. It's not the way it is. You know, I used to rely on my fax machine, and these days not so much. And so what you do is you adjust for what these new technologies are and what people want. You know, we're able to do this. We're able to do this interview, you know, virtually. You know, there was a day a long time ago where I would have had to come to a studio and sit with you. Now it's much easier. So the newspapers deserve some responsibility for not realizing that things were changing and sticking to an old model that's failed. You've got, Gannett has lost over $100 million in the last 6 months. Their stock has gone down 70%. This business is failing. They're laying off reporters. They're furloughing hardworking reporters. They're not contributing to the 401k. They're destroying some of these once good papers, and the real loser in this are the people who don't get access. They learn a lot about where to get a good chicken wing in whatever town you're in New Jersey, but they're not really getting information on how their state legislator or their mayor or their county commissioner votes.
Right, and that is such an excellent point. When I've gone out to talk about, fake news and what have you, one of the things that I will tell people is go look at that local reporter because they have to live in the community and they've got to answer to that person. So that is usually more reliable information. But there's clearly a need, David, and why aren't media companies seeing that need? Because there is, again, if you have a cell phone and the things that you see on TikTok, the way I look at some of the editing is like, wow, it used to be you needed a very expensive camera and a lot of training on equipment and a lot of legwork, but really you can just click and cut and paste, and I myself have a hard time being able to tell, wait, now where consider the source, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Who said it? So there is a need. Is there any hope that we can have a press corps, a media that isn't all opinion and partisan and entertainment? Really, is what a lot of you see at the national level is more entertainment.
And I don't know. I am, I personally, I'm so sick and tired of hearing reporters' opinions on issues. I really am. And to me, I mean, I've got opinions on issues, but I don't share them. And what you really have to do, and you know this better than I do, it's the trust that a journalist develops with their reader. Laura, I've known you, like 22 years? If you say something, I know it's true, because you're not just going out there and repeating something that you heard without being absolutely sure that it's correct, without confirming it, without it making sense to you. So I trust you. If you say something, I believe it because you're I don't know, you're gonna get mad at me for saying this. You're sort of the Walter Cronkite of the new generation. When Walter Cronkite said something, you believed him because he just never said something that wasn't true. Now you just don't know. And there's so much pressure on the media to compete with people going direct on Twitter, where they want to be fast and not accurate. And, I deal with it every day, and I want to be fast. To make no mistake, I want to be out there first with a story, but I don't want to ever have to call back a story and say I got that wrong.
Right, and one of the things that I take very seriously, and it is a challenge for a lot of reporters who have been schooled the old school way, is you want to be first, but it seems like a lot of people out there don't care if they get it wrong. That's okay. I can just correct it later, because information is streaming 24/7. It used to be, well, at 6 o'clock, this better be right. And at 11 o'clock, when the news comes on, this better be right. Yeah. And by a certain deadline is going to go into print, and it better be right. And there aren't a lot of people, who have that work ethic. But I have to think, the pendulum is kind of swinging, that eventually it will swing back. And people will say, you know what, enough of whoever you are on whatever platform cutting and pasting and just repeating what other campaigns are saying. Don't you think that the pendulum will eventually swing back?
I hope so. I really do. I'm a lot older than you, so you have more hope than I do to be around for that. It takes, pendulums don't swing quickly, but I too, I hold out hope that this will get a little bit better.
I wanted to also get your thoughts on polling and how, again, a lot of reporters, they have a poll. And I remember a day and age where my news director did not want me to report on the polls, because they said, and this is going back 20 some years ago, that's the horse race. We want to talk about who the candidate is. where they stand on the issues. But getting access to the candidates, I have to tell you, has been very, very challenging this year. Very, very challenging.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right about the polls. I mean, what we do at the New Jersey Globe is I rely on websites like 538.com, and I look, and they do an independent grading system, and if the poll comes from somebody that's under a B, I don't want to touch it. And if it comes from somebody that isn't even on their list, there's no way I'm touching it. So you've got to be cautious and deal with reputable pollsters. And sometimes good pollsters come back with bad numbers, but bad pollsters almost never come back with good numbers.
Looking ahead to not just 2023 in New Jersey, but to 2024, do you think the dynamic of election coverage or election campaigning is going to be changing as well? I myself had a difficulty even finding a telephone number. I mean, I can find information pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
So many campaigns are email, and they might be quick to responding on email, but a lot of the electorate, even though there's a younger generation that really is into the texting and email, there is people who want to see, who want you to pick up the phone, who want to talk to you. But I didn't see a lot of that this in the midterms. So how do you see the dynamic changing as we head into 2024?
No, I mean, campaigns change constantly. And as I get older, it's harder and harder to keep up with those changes. Your kids, someday I think what's going to happen is on their phone or whatever they carry with them that used to be a telephone, they're going to get a message popping up one day saying you can vote now, and they're going to click the screen and they're going to vote right from their phone, and they're not going to have to go anywhere. I mean, these things are changing so rapidly. Addressable cable commercials where candidate campaigns they don't have to buy New York City airtime as much, where they're spending millions of dollars to show their ads to people that can't vote for them either. These things change quickly, and I think the media, everybody, we've all got to change. We got to change with the times, and that's that. And understand what the campaigns are doing and cover it based upon what they need, and not try and just dig our heels in and say, well, this is how I've always done it.
Yeah. Well, so on the flip side of me, frustration of how everything is on social media, could this be an opportunity for candidates who may not have a big budget? Okay, I don't need to advertise on New York or in Philly or in New Jersey. I can just put this out because I've got a lot of followers on TikTok, or I have a lot of likes on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening. We saw a race this year. Congressman Bill Pascrell. He's been in Congress since 1996. He has done extraordinarily well in every election he runs, and he wins by landslides. He had a relatively, when I say relatively, closest race since his first one for Congress in the 90s, against the guy who really didn't have a lot of money on voter persuasion, but young guy who has figured out social media. And I haven't figured out whether that's the reason, but suddenly Pascrell's numbers, he dropped from 70%, probably another 25 points below where he was.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. And we'll have to get you in studio eventually, because as much as I love the ease of being able to do things over a link, there's nothing beats person to person.
Yeah, well, and only for you would I do that.
David Wildstein, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joining me now is Frank Sapola. He is the owner of Context Media and a longtime reporter. Frank, it's always good to see you. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Laura.
All right, so let's talk about something you and I know a lot about, media coverage. So how has the media coverage of the campaign affected the midterms? What are your thoughts?
Well, I have been talking about this, and we'll talk about it probably extensively in a bit, but I am just really amazed at how poor the polling has been over the last few election cycles. With regard to coverage, however, I thought it is in the best interest of the networks and the local stations to sort of create some conflict going into the election. And you notice a lot of races they were focusing on were either close or within 1 or 2 percentage points. And that gives a lot of fodder for the pundits to go on and on about it. I thought overall the coverage was fairly well. As we saw, it was less of a red wave, more probably of a red ripple. It'll be a couple of days or weeks before we know for sure. But I thought all in all, the media coverage was fairly good in this election cycle.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the polls. There was a time when you and I worked together when we were at News 12. I was told as a political reporter, you're not going to report on the polls. That is the horse race. Your job is to report on a candidate, on where they stand and the issues. Don't report on the polls. But more and more people are making the polls the narrative. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a problem with that, quite frankly. And let's go back a little bit. In 2016, Hillary Clinton had an 83% chance, according to the polls, of winning the election, and we know that she lost. Governor Ron DeSantis, 4 years ago, the governor of Florida, he was trailing in 6 of the 8 major polls going into that election, and he won. And just last year, Governor Murphy, I think, at last check going into that re-election campaign, was said to have a 6-point lead going in against Jack Ciattarelli, and he just squeaked out a win. Now, my theory is as follows. You talk about years ago. A phone used to ring in somebody's house. You'd pick it up. It was on the wall, the phone, or it was on a desk, okay? You knew that person was there. He or she wasn't so suspicious about government, gave his or her really accurate opinion based on the questions, and we sort of had an accurate poll going into it. Now look at what has happened. I live in New Jersey and my area code is 908, okay? And let's say I move to Florida or North Carolina. People are calling me on that 908 area code still thinking I'm in New Jersey. And if I'm so inclined, because I'm suspicious about the government, I'm talking about anyone who might be, you might say, yes, I'm going to vote in that election. I'm going to do this when you're not able to vote or you can't vote. So what's coming into the funnel and being shot out of the funnel is inaccurate. And until they solve this problem, I think that we're going to have problems going forward with regard to predicting races. However, without the polls, what would the pundits chatter about in the months and weeks before Election Day? So it's a double-edged sword. They have to fix the polling and they have to make sure it's more accurate.
Yeah, and how in the world do you do that? And I think that is a huge issue, is consider the source, right? That's another fundamental. Consider the source. Well, finding the source can be very, very challenging.
Yeah, and not only that, but a lot of the networks are invested in these numbers. They provide the money, or in some cases own the polling companies in part. So it's in their best interest to say that these numbers are accurate. The dirty little secret is, in my opinion at least, they are not accurate and haven't been accurate for the last few election cycles. A lot of these are done online. A lot of these are the old-fashioned phone calls. A lot of these are people in person. You know, they have not formulated a good model for this as of yet. And in fact, I know a friend of mine who went to his news director and said, I'd love to do a story on the inaccuracy of the polling, exactly what I'm talking about. And he was just shooed away. It's in the best interest that we continue to chat about these numbers, even if they are inaccurate.
One of the best ways to kind of really get to the real issues is a reporter getting up and physically going and interacting with the candidate and putting that out there. But they aren't so much. And a lot of the campaigns are conducted online. I had a difficult time finding phone numbers for certain candidates. And it's not that I'm opposed to technology, but sometimes you just need to pick up the phone. So how do you think that the media has changed with their interactions with the candidates?
Well, you bring up a good point. Doing it correctly costs money. The margins in television news are not as what they used to be 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the reporter has changed as well. I mean, I'm not going to knock any reporter. I think they go to work every day trying to do the best job they possibly can. But when we've talked about this in the past, the reporter is not told, hey, go out and cover the Murphy Ciattarelli race and take as much time as you want. The reporter is told, I need you to tweet, I need you to post, I need you to write the web story, I need you to get in earlier, I need you to also do this story, turn around another package, so on and so forth. They're overwhelmed. They're doing the best they can, but the way to do it correctly is like some of the old style. And I'm thinking of Marsha Kramer at this point at Channel 2 in New York City, where her only beat is politics. And that way she can spend her time every single day getting relationships going, finding out people who know more than she does, sort of really getting a feel of it. But the Marsha Kramers of the world, great reporter, great political reporter, are slowly fading away. And this reliance on polling, so pundits could chatter about this endlessly up until election day, is simply not working anymore. The answer to your question is you need resources to do it right, and they don't have the resources like they used to.
Right, without a doubt, without a doubt, and the Laura Joneses of the world out there,
Yeah,
on the State House beat. But social media is playing a role. Anybody with a cell phone and a social media account can produce products that look as good as sometimes what we used to do using a very expensive camera. You had an audio, you had a camera, you had editors, you had a lot of people. So, what role has social media is it playing?
I think
Is there positive, negative? I mean, I certainly see the negative end on, as far as those, beat reporters who people knew, oh, you know what, something happened, let's go check such and such. I know I can trust that person.
Well, you make a very good point. There was just a survey out the other day that the vast majority of Americans under the age of 30 get the bulk of their news from TikTok. I mean, so be it. But don't you think police departments, candidates have seen this, and they are going around the news media, the traditional news media, which might ask a tough question, and they're producing their own videos. And those videos are picked up by the news media because it's cheap to do. You just, hey, so-and-so candidate John Smith just posted something on Facebook. Let's use some of that video and create a story around it. There's not much effort needed to do that. So they've become the information machine instead of the other way around. And when you have something like that, you can't ask the tough questions. Hey, I've been to news conferences not more than 5 years ago where they'll come out and say, hey, we're going to make an announcement and we're taking no questions. Now, what the heck is a news conference for? By the way, to my credit, and I'm sure yours, I just ignore that and ask a question anyway.
Well, that's it. You throw the question out anywhere. So at least, and that's key, is throwing the question out, because if you throw it out, 9 times out of 10, they're going to react. They're going to respond. Sometimes they don't. But typically, people want to, they want to talk. They want to answer questions.
But now what they'll do is they will videotape the press conference themselves and just email it to the station. So the reporter is not even involved in. I don't have that opportunity, or you don't have that opportunity to ask the question. You're not even in the room anymore. So they have their own production company, their own quote unquote news department, and they could say and do whatever they want and send it to the station. And the station, pressed for time and money, is just going to scoop that up and probably in these smaller markets just regurgitate that.
Right. And it is very, very difficult then to get something that is that has gone through the sniff test, that has gone through, that truth meter to see. So moving, as we look ahead to 2023 in New Jersey, we'll have Senate and Assembly seats up, and then looking to 2024, because those that will be underway if it's not already. How do you think? Does the media, does the old school media, have a chance at coming back? Because ultimately, a pendulum swings one way, it swings back and forth. And will people get so tired of looking at TikTok that they finally say, you know what, no, this is gone down a rabbit hole that really isn't reliable. And you know what, I want to go to somebody who I know has vetted the facts and has accurate information, and then I can make an informed decision.
Yeah, to answer your question, I'm hopeful. I think the polling companies will eventually work on a model that works. We're not there yet. I know they're trying different things every election cycle. Eventually, they'll work on a model. They'll get a model that works, number one. Number two, I think you're right. Eventually, people are going to be sick of seeing TikTok videos with a candidate and then somebody dancing and then another candidate and somebody else doing a skit. and I've watched a couple, everybody on there, they're terrible actors. You know, they come in, the husband comes in, he says something, the wife laughs. You know, it's all silly stuff. But to answer your question, for those who are engaged in the process, there is plenty of information out there to read. I was with somebody the other day and I said the same thing, and that person said, well, unfortunately, nobody reads anymore. And I don't believe that. If you're engaged in the process, you should read, you should find out what's going on. And the traditional journalism is well respected, even though it's been battered around and people, and I even hate to use this term because it's so inaccurate, fake news and all that nonsense. Okay. Every reporter goes out every day to report the story as he or she sees fit and accurately. Nobody goes into their car, goes out to a story and says, you know, I'm going to spin it this way. I've never met anybody like that. That person doesn't exist. There are reliable sources out there for information. People should find them.
Yeah, you know, social media, they have their little blue ticks and such. Journalists need one. So you know, oh, this is an actual journalist who has studied and earned their story. That's what journalists need now. That's my big idea. Get our own tick for social media, so you know.
Let's brand that right now. Let's brand that right now and give it a name. The Jones model.
That's it. Keeping up with the Joneses. Frank Cipolla, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and for giving us your thoughts. It's always good to see you.
Laura, always a pleasure. Be well.
And that will do it for today. Thank you so much for watching New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.